Hello and welcome to episode 152 of the Balanced Approach podcast. I'm your host, Louis Padian. Today we will be discussing why your old diet doesn't quite work anymore, what's really happening, and what you need to do instead. And this is something that often comes up in conversations, especially with a lot of my clients and people who are starting to work with me, that they try their old ways of dieting, especially when they were younger, and it doesn't seem to get them results that they wanted, or they get really frustrated with it. And it does feel harder, but that doesn't mean that you're doing anything wrong in particular. And actually, maybe we need to adjust things to make stuff work a bit better for you, your current circumstances, your current life. So today we're discussing why this might be. We'll look at potentially metabolism, as that's something that often comes up in these conversations, looking at muscle, lifestyle change, and how to actually measure the progress and what we can actually do moving forwards. So the big question is it harder to lose weight now than it was when you were younger? And yes, it probably does feel harder, but it isn't because your metabolism is broken or that you have to eat barely anything in rabbit food to lose weight. Now, there is a slight change, and that is when we look at the data, it's between like 60 and 100 calories that we see between old people and young people. That's the difference. So young people burn a bit more calories with their resting metabolic rate, which is the calories that we burn if we lay in bed all day. So there is a slight difference as we get older. But the reason behind this isn't because that we suddenly need less energy. Often it's because that there's a change in our body composition. As people get older, it's harder to maintain and gain muscle mass, and muscle is more metabolically active. So when we're looking at calories that they burn each per day, so muscle burns 13 calories per kilogram at rest, whilst fat burns 4.5 calories per kilogram at rest. So that's a big difference between the two. And if we are losing muscle mass as we age, then we are going to burn less calories. And that accounts for a huge amount of the reduction in calorie energy expenditure. So if we can be more active and maintain that muscle mass, then we're probably going to see less of an effect on our metabolism, especially our resting metabolism. This also impacts our things like our strength, our balance, and it's really important, something to focus on, especially if we're trying to lose weight, is trying to maintain that muscle mass. Something that we've seen, especially at the moment, people who are on GLP-1s losing huge amounts of weight quite quickly, but because they're not getting enough protein, they're not stimulating their muscle mass, they're losing a lot of muscle mass with that as well, which can be detrimental to their health long term. So it isn't your metabolism necessarily. Your metabolism might be a bit slower, but that's because your body composition has changed. What has really changed is actually people's lives. When we are young, we are made of rubber and glue. We're extremely resilient. We can function on very little sleep. We're extremely active. We tend to go outside a lot more, don't have a lot of responsibilities. And that gives us, when we're focusing on losing weight when we're younger, actually that takes up a huge amount of our headspace and our priorities. It can go quite high up in it. When I was at uni, if I wanted to lose weight, it was a lot easier because I didn't really have a huge amount of responsibilities or stress in my life. That I could go to the gym, I could prepare all my meals in advance, I could make sure I got my sleep in, I can go out for walks during the day. It was really, really simple and straightforward. When now I've got a 9 to 5, I'm a bit older, I've got chores to do, I'm not home all the time, I'm not fully in control of my own schedule. That makes it more challenging and more difficult for me now. And I'm sure you're very much in the same boat. So it isn't that you have anything wrong with you. It just means that life has changed, and we need to look at that, and we need to look at what our priorities are right now. People, as they get older, will probably tend to sit more. They tend not to be as active or take part in group exercise, those sorts of things. They tend to sleep less or prioritize their sleep and try and get some more sleep in. And stress seems to be quite high. And when we're looking at weight loss is a stress in itself. So if you're already working in a highly stressful job, or you feel quite stressed, us adding weight loss into the mix is only going to make things a lot more stressful. So, and it means that you're probably not going to be as adherent to that diet or be able to prioritize things or get the results that you previously got. So it's maybe a bit of a change in mindset in regards to our lifestyles or our expectations around that. Now, for women especially, there is a bit of a change that we've got to consider, and that is the menopause. So when I'm working with women who have gone through the menopause, going through the menopause, they tend to feel like they've gained a lot of weight around their midsection. And what we tend to see is that women's fat distribution changes throughout the menopause. So they go from storing it probably on the back of their legs and their bums, on the back of their arms. They probably see, and then as they go through the menopause, they might go into what we see sort of a more masculine sort of fat distribution, where they store it very much around the midsection. And what women might see, or what you might feel, is that you suddenly felt like you gained loads of weight around your stomach, when actually some of that might have redistributed as well. So that's something else to consider alongside this, that maybe we need to have a look at how we're measuring your progress. So the scale weight might not change too much. Obviously, we're going to have changes day to day, and that can be quite triggering for people, which I'll do a whole different episode on around how to manage your relationship with the scales. But making sure that we're measuring the outcomes appropriately. So not just relying on scale weight, or not just weighing willy-nilly whenever we can or when we remember. Being a bit more strategic with this, but also doing things like measurements around our midsection, around our arms, around our legs potentially, maybe progress photos, maybe how clothes are fitting, maybe assessments on our overall lifestyle. So how's our sleep, how's our energy levels, how's my relationship with food. All these things are worth measuring, because if we're just taking a single metric that can be influenced by a lot of things, and we're holding a whole amount of all of our worth and progress, which again can be problematic, onto that probably unreliable number, that maybe we need to have a look at getting a better rounded picture of how our progress is actually going. So this is where we might look at things like our daily activity. We might be more stringent with monitoring our food intake. We might measure our sleep. We might measure our stress, our energy, alongside that, our mood, and using these other markers of success. Because if you're losing weight, but all those other things are in the pan, then weight loss probably isn't the best thing for you. But if we can get you in a place where you're feeling better, you're sleeping better, your relationship with food is good, you're monitoring your food quite well, you're being quite active, enjoying yourself, and weight loss comes along with that, then that'll be really beneficial for your overall quality of life. Plus, you're more likely to keep it up long term, which is what we want. So, as I've said, the main things of what we actually want to focus on are the things within our control. There's no point focusing on things like the amount of the stress of work and things. We might be able to manage them a bit better, or what other people's opinions are, or the fact that our metabolism might be a bit slower than it used to be, or that life is a bit more stressful. Actually, what can we manage within that? So if we're looking at trying to get effective weight loss, calorie balance is really important. How we're going to monitor our energy intake. Maybe we do photos of our food, maybe we keep a written food diary, maybe we track our calories. Same with our activity, how we're going to monitor our activity, because if we can measure the inputs, which is our food and drink, we measure the outputs, which is our energy expenditure, such as our activity, our walking, those sorts of things, or exercise, and we can measure our outcomes, which is your weight, your waist measurements, your mood, all those sorts of things. If we can measure those quite accurately and consistently, then we know what's working and what's not, or where we might need to adjust things. But things I'd recommend you focusing on, especially as you get older, trying to be more active, really try and maintain that muscle mass, especially you can get some strength training in there, or some form of activity that makes your muscles work, that you're going through full range of motion. So if it's a team activity, if it involves going up and down hills, if it's cycling, even if it's running or going to the gym, or whatever it is, embrace it, do it, because the more active we are, the more likely we are to hold on to that muscle mass. Alongside that, getting enough protein in our diet. As I said, as we get past the age of about 30, we get something called anabolic resistance, where our body, we have to stimulate muscle and provide it with a bit more protein in order to get the same response as we get older, and that gets worse and worse as we age. So trying to get more protein into the diet can be really useful to help maintain and hopefully gain a bit of muscle mass, because not only is that good for our weight loss and maintaining a healthy weight, but healthy aging as well, keeping that independence, keeping things like balance, and being able to do chores, being able to carry things as we get older. Because if we wait until we're older, then it's much harder to bring it back. So the earlier we can start that, the better. How much should we have in? If you haven't listened to these episodes before, usually 20 to 30 grams 3 times a day. So trying to get 20, 30 grams of protein at each main meal, maybe a little bit in between as well. Trying to get a good protein source at each meal, plus some veggies, some starch, carbohydrates, things like that. We'll add a little bit more in there as well. So that's all quite good and straightforward stuff. I'll probably cover it again, but go back a few episodes. I'm sure I've covered it there. But at the end of the day, I think it's important to underline that your metabolism isn't broken. Yes, it is harder now to lose weight than it was when you were younger, but there are lots of reasons for that. And maybe focusing on the reasons and the things that we can control within your sphere of influence is the way to go, because if we're focused on things outside of that, it's just going to be wasting energy and add more to the stress of a life that is pretty much already stressed, as I've just said. So, as I've just said, metabolism does change as we get older, but probably not as much as you think. And that's mainly down to reduction in muscle mass. So let's try and focus on keeping that. The main driver to making things harder is changing overall lifestyle habits, those sorts of things which are going to negatively impact our energy balance and make it more likely for us to eat more but move a bit less, which is going to cause weight gain as we get older. Plus, probably not measuring it correctly in a way, or assessing for things like changes in body composition as we go through things like menopause as well. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour to why your old diet probably isn't working right now. If this is something that you want support with, or you feel that's really in your head at the moment, then obviously listen to some previous episodes, reach out to me on social media. I'll be talking a lot around these sorts of topics moving forward. And this is something that I'm hugely passionate about, is helping people really understand nutrition, understand what's actually going on, but also give you the tools to survive and thrive long term. So if you want support with that, then please do reach out to me. I'm at Louis Padian Nutrition on all social media platforms. Just DM me on there. I've got some exciting new resources coming up for you, but for now we have got a free recipe book and calorie and protein calculator, which would be definitely useful if you're listening to this episode. So go into my website, louispadiannutrition.com. There is a calorie calculator and protein calculator on there, tell you how many calories you need depending on your activity and your goals and your age. Tell me how many calories you need and how much protein you need per day, but also per meal, which is really, really useful, and give you some useful targets to hit. Alongside that, a 5-day meal plan and recipe book with 20 delicious recipes in there, all calorie calculated, but all delicious, all protein conscious, most of them are high protein, that are things that you can try to help maintain this muscle mass long term, or gain some muscle mass long term. But for now, thank you very much for listening to today's episode, and I look forward to catching you on the next one.